sisi katheli imfundiso sezwi akho uze usivuselele sive inyaniso yakho. Amen.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Modimo ntate, Modimo mora, Modimo moya o halalelang, Trinity ongcwele, omhle noncomekayo. Lord God, we thank you this morning. Father, we wish to come before you in our prayer. And Father, we wish to give thanks to you for the gift of life we now enjoy. Thanks, Lord, for the good opportunity of meeting in this manner and fashion. Thanks for every blessing bestowed upon us. Siyakubulela, siyakuncoma, siyakunqula, siyakubhedesha. Kuba akakho uThixo onjengawe. Enkosi mzali kamathuba okuzuzwa kofefe lwakho. For your grace is sufficient for us. Thank you, Lord, for this morning. Father, we wish to bring this session before you in our prayer and seek your guidance, your presence, that you may guide and inspire our thoughts, that you may be with us in every deliberations that are going to be taking place here this morning. We thank you for this organization, for the good work of putting together this very good program this morning, and calling upon everyone across the province of the Eastern Cape, from all and different sectors of society, for us to come and gather in this manner and fashion here, to look back, look now, and look to the future of our nation and our country, South Africa. Lord, we thank you. As we were singing here this morning, siqaphela Nkosi lengoma yaculwa kudala Nkosi kumfundisi uDiyo Soka. It is fresh as if he was singing it yesterday. It is as if he was singing it now, looking at the manner in which izinto Nkosi ezihamba ngayo elizweni lethu. Sishoteke Nkosi ngokufika kule ndawo ethi bona izwe lakho wethu uxolele izono zalo. Ungayithobi inqumbo yakho. Lord, be with the facilitator here this morning. Inspire him, mgcine umlondoloze, mphathe umphakamise. Umnike Nkosi ukufikelela to everyone in this house. Be with everyone ozawuparticipate nangayo nayiphini indlela somandla, so that xa siphuma apha ekugqibeleni ngokujika kwelanga kwemini namhlanje siphume sihlaziyekile Nkosi ezingqondweni, siphume Nkosi sihlaziyekile kwindlela yokucinga nokubona izinto. Sincede ke Nkosi, unite us as we differ in many ways ngendlela sizawubona ngayo nesizawucinga ngayo. So sincede for the best outcome of this session. Nalilizwe Nkosi loMzantsi Afrika lijinge emagxethu ke. Jinga Nkosi kwimiwewe ngenxa yezinto Nkosi esizibonayo. Sungasincami Thixo, ungasilahli. Naba bantu bakho Nkosi, ngoba wena nguThixo kwakude kudala, who called on individuals, who called on institutions and organizations, ukuba mabeme, Thixo wami ongunaphakade. Siyabulela Somandla. Sikuvile many a times xa usithi nina bakhangela ubulungisa. Khangelani kwiliwa enaxholwa kulo. Sizama ukwenza lonto Somandla. Njalo Nkosi senze singabi sabuya umva ngokusikhangela okokuba bekutheni na uze sibe lapha. Kodwa sincede unite us on one thing, leyathethwa nguNehemiah. Come, let us reason together and build the walls of our Jerusalem. Father, we ask you, in the name of the Father, the Son, and that of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you. Ungcwele igama lakho, ubukumkani bakho mabufeke, enthando yakho yenziwe emhlabeni nje ngokuba isenziwa ezulwini. Usiphe namhlanje isonka sethu semihla ngemihla, usixolele izono zethu njengokuba nathi sixolela abo bazonayo. Thina ungasingenisi ekuhendweni sisindise enkohlekelweni, ukuba ubukumkani obubekho amandla ingawekho nobungcwalisa bubo bakho kube ngunaphakade. Ameni nobungcwalisa bubo bakho kude kube ngunaphakade. Udumiso malubekho kuyise nakuye unyana nakuye umoya oyingcwele, njengokuba kunjalo kwasekuqalekeni kunjalo kaloku nje kuyakumana kuba njalo kode kube kunaphakade. Thank you very much.
Enkosi kakhulu tata. Amaxesha amaninzi ayiflow kwezi spaces zethu singamaqabane uyabona. So apha engqondweni kugcwele ingoma zomzabalazo. So kumandi ke xa uhleli apha uyabona sithandaze, ndiva kamandi nomoya wami uva, not that andizithandi eziya zethu zoba we call each other to action. Good morning again. Igama lam ndinguNontando Ngamlana. Ndiphangelela le organization kuthiwa ngu-Ephesus Coplan. Ephesus means liberation in Greek. Coplan is shortened for something else, and community research and planning. We are based here up in Monty. We were established in the early 1980s, doing work that had a lot to do with Umzabalazo at the time, but also working on urban inclusivity and really resisting forced removals of black families from the urban center to the periphery. If you were ulapha ke border at that time, you would know ba a 20-kilometer move that way to Mdantsane or Kuchwe, South Africa, or Bakeswesi Sky. If you were moved towards Gomcha or Kuchwe, South Africa, mistake wa cross Lamlambo, Ingiba, Usetranskei. And so it had disastrous consequences for families in the Eastern Cape Indoye Group Areas Act. So Afesis Copland finds its roots in activism, finds its roots in resisting ubandlululo in all shapes and forms. It's quite sad that we find ourselves even in the democratic dispensation kufuneka sisazabalazile. And the struggle has now taken a different form. However, it is a struggle nonetheless, because at the core of it, umuntu omnyama usagcina zelekile. And so asikwazi ke to rest, sine agency, sine power, sinamazwi, and we can do something. Namhlanje ke we have a partner in the room. We're very excited to work with this partner. My Vote Counts. They do brilliant work around voting and elections. They do research around the space of elections and advocacy in that manner. So we're very excited to bring you this space namhlanje with our partners in My Vote Counts. You'll see them later on. They'll come up and they'll speak a little bit about their work and what brings them into the room. Welcome. We trust ukubana niphumlile abebe driver this morning to get here. We are happy that you've made it safely. Very excited to have all of you here. But also, I think very excited for me because this year seems to have just flown by so quickly, and some of you I haven't seen in a while. So I'm really, really excited to be in the room with you in this manner. However, I am very excited about the content and the conversation we're about to have. The conversation itself excites me. And so I think part of what we're trying to do today is to mobilize critical voices in the Eastern Cape to say we matter, and we matter fully. And that when we said the people shall govern, that meant something for us, and it must mean something. We want to engage in conversation and reflect on the process of lawmaking, but particularly reflecting on electoral reform and talking about the act, the Amendment Act that's sitting before Parliament. So to help us do that this morning, Dr. Simthembile Mbete, some of you may know her, a young lady that I love to bits. Whenever she speaks, Simthembile gives you hope. Ukuniki hope yokubana likhona ihlumela. And she moves in very big spaces, very, very big spaces. So she was part of the advisory panel to the minister and the department on this draft bill. And she's going to talk to us about that process. But Eonando, beyond the many hats that she wears and the brilliant things that she does, it's her heart that brings her all the time into our spaces, because in her we always feel like we have a comrade, and in her we always feel like we have a social justice activist. So without wasting much time, let me give over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's receive Dr. Simthembile Mbete. Is somebody flighting the presentation?
I sent it earlier.
They're working on it.
And of course, Sissy, thank you very much for that very generous welcome. Thank you. Good morning. Molweni njani? Sikhona. I don't know. Oh, nuts. Okay. Thank you so much. for inviting me to speak to you today about the electoral reform process, but also to just give you a bit of a background and a history of how we got here. And then Ole Tlogonolo from My Vote Counts will be speaking specifically about the bill that's being discussed in Parliament. So now I'm just going to be providing a bit of a background of how we got here. So next slide, please. So this conversation really in this iteration, so this version. And I'm sorry, Badala, for not doing more of an introduction and a welcome. There's a lot to get through. I think I've got 30 minutes. And I want to be able to give you as much as possible so that the breakaways are meaningful, so you've got all the information you need for that. So in 2020, the reason why we're here and why we're having this conversation is because in 2020, the Constitutional Court on the 11th of June passed a judgment that basically speeded up the discussion that had been happening for a few years on changing South Africa's electoral system. And basically, what the judgment was about was a case that was brought to the court by an organization called the New Nation Movement. It was a number of organizations, but the main one was New Nation. Now, New Nation started the process actually in 2019. In March of 2019, they approached the Western Cape High Court to request an urgent, in 2018, they approached the Western Cape High Court to basically request the court to declare that the Electoral Act is unconstitutional because you can't be elected to national or provincial government without being a member of a political party. You'll all know that at local government, you can run in a ward election as an independent or as part of a community, a CSO, or whatever community movement. At national and provincial level, you have to be a member of a political party if you want to be an MP or if you want to be an MPL. And basically what New Nation Movement said is that it goes against the Bill of Rights because in Section 19 of the Bill of Rights, Section 19 sets out our political rights. And Section 19 says that every person, I think Section A basically says everyone has the right to vote. And every vote counts equally. Section B says everyone has a right to join a political party or to start a political party. Section C says every citizen has a right to stand for office and, if elected, to hold office at any one of the levels. Now, what New Nation Movement said is that Section 19C doesn't say you need to be a member of a political party to hold office. It says anyone has the right to run for office. So if the Electoral Act for national and for provincial only says that only political parties are allowed to contest an election. Political parties, not individuals. Then that act is unconstitutional. The Western Cape High Court didn't agree. It dismissed the case. So New Nation lost in the Western Cape High Court. So then in 2019, in March of 2019, New Nation approached the Constitutional Court and made an urgent appeal of the Western Cape High Court case. Remember, 2019 is the year of the election. So the election was held on the 8th of May of 2019. They approached the Constitutional Court in March 2019 to appeal. The court says this isn't urgent, but we will look at the case. We'll hear you, but not now. So the court hears the case in August 2019. And the IEC, so Parliament, the Parliament of South Africa, is the main, is the respondent to this case because Parliament makes our laws. The Department of Home Affairs is also, the IEC joins as a amicus because it has an interest in this. But I want to say right now that remember that the IEC is just a technical advisor. The IEC is just the administration body for elections. The IEC does not make electoral law, and I think it's an important thing for us to remember. So the Constitutional Court hears the case, and in June of 2020, the 11th of June of 2020 specifically, it rules in New Nation movement's favor. And gives the National Assembly 24 months to amend the Electoral Act to allow individuals to contest national and provincial elections. And basically what the court says is that the Electoral Act of 1998 is unconstitutional because it doesn't allow individuals to run for election at national and provincial level. But it says that we're going to suspend the declaration of unconstitutionality for 24 months. Because think about it, if the Constitutional Court says the Electoral Act of 1998 is unconstitutional, that makes every election since 1998 unconstitutional. So the court says, no, it doesn't apply to other elections. It's only for elections from 2020. And actually, the act is only unconstitutional from the 10th of June of 2022. And what that does is that it allows Parliament to fix the act, to make it constitutional. Okay. The Constitutional Court has done this before with all sorts of other things. Like the SASA decision, what was that company? That Paymaster, that one, yeah. And it said this was the wrong decision, but these people are doing the grants. They must be allowed to keep doing it until they fix, until the minister fixes it. So the Constitutional Court does that, so that's what they did. But the deadline that they gave Parliament was the 10th of June of 2022. The reason they gave 24 months is that our next election is in 2024. It's sometime between May and August of 2024. The earliest the election can happen is May, around the 8th of May. Election's always on a Wednesday, so whatever day. And the latest it can happen is August of 2024. The IEC said to the Constitutional Court, it takes us between 18 months and 24 months to organize an election. Last year where they put on an election in 6 weeks. But usually it takes 18 to 24 months for the IEC to run an election. So the IEC said to the court, we need at least 24 months to organize the election for 2024. So the court said, okay, fine, 2024, 24 months is 2022. So the IEC said, okay, there needs to be an electoral act that's constitutional by 2022, so that gives the Parliament 2 years to make the Electoral Act constitutional. Now, the reason why the Constitutional Court gave Parliament that responsibility is that the Constitution says Parliament is the only arm of state that can make electoral law. That's what the Constitution says, so the Constitutional Court says that. The deadline set, as I said, was 10th of June, 2022. We all know Parliament did not meet that deadline. So a new deadline, they went back to the Constitutional Court, asked for more time. The new deadline is the 10th of December of 2022. Now, there's a lot that needs to be done before the 10th of December in the next 2 months. The National Assembly, the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs, which is discussing this, needs to finish its work and needs to adopt some kind of bill. Then that bill needs to be passed in the National Assembly. Then that bill needs to go to the National Council of Provinces. And the National Council of Provinces has its own committee that needs to look at the bill in terms of how it affects the provinces. And they have to do their own public hearings about the bill in each of the provinces. And then that committee in the National House of Provinces needs to adopt whatever bill, however they change it. Then that bill needs to be passed. Then it needs to go to the president. The president needs to sign it. And then there needs to be regulations written about that act. All of this needs to happen before the 10th of December. One of the things that has been done to try to accelerate the process, so to hurry the process up, is to change the bill from a bill that affects provinces, so that needs to go to the NCOP, to giving it a label as a bill that doesn't affect provinces. So when there's a new law in Parliament, it's either a Section 75 or it's a 76. This bill has been tagged as a 76, and a 76 is one that affects provinces. Obviously, it affects provinces because it's about provincial elections. So it's been a Section 76 all this time. Then last week, there was a suggestion that actually we must just make it a 75 so that we can cut out the NCOP process. I don't know if that suggestion has actually been adopted, but it looks like that might be a way that they try to cut time. Okay. So this is why we are here. Now, that judgment, there were 3 judgments in the New Nation case. What we call the majority judgment was drafted by Justice Madlanga, and he was supported by 8 judges. There was also a concurring judgment, a judgment that agrees but has a different spin on it. And that one was drafted by Justice Jafta, and it was also supported by 8 judges. There was one dissent, so a judgment that disagrees, and that was by Justice Froneman, and he's the only one who dissented. Now, as I said before, that the foundation for the judgment was that the political rights in Section 19 of the Constitution, that you can vote, that you can join or start a political party, that you can run for office, those 3 rights are linked. You can't look at the right to vote and say you only have the right to vote in isolation from the right to run for office. If you have the right to vote, you must be able to have the right to run for office, right? And so you can't then restrict that right to run for office to being a member of a political party. That the right to stand for office and to be elected to represent your country or your province must be possible without being a member of a political party. Okay, so that's the problem we're trying to solve. Now, the challenge here is that, can we see the presentation, please, and go to the next slide? The next slide. Okay, so this was the judgment. You guys will all get these slides. Thank you, this slide. Okay. Now, the challenge here is that allowing any citizen to run for office without joining a political party means that we need to change the electoral system that we have. It's not just about changing the words in a law. It affects an entire system. That's the problem and it's not a bad problem. I think it's a good problem, but that's the issue that we're sitting with here. Now, for us to change our electoral system, we have a few limitations that are in the Constitution. The first limitation that we have is that the Constitution requires that we have a multi-party system. Section 1 of the Constitution, of the founding provisions, says the Republic of South Africa is one sovereign democratic state founded on the following values, and in section D there, 1D, it says universal adult suffrage, everyone can vote, a national common voters roll, regular elections, and a multi-party system of democratic government. So what that means is that many parties must be able to compete for power. We can't be like China and have one party, or like Tanzania used to. Many parties must be able to compete. So any electoral system that we adopt must make it possible for there to be more than one or two parties that compete. Okay. What the majority judgment of the Constitutional Court also said is that when you see multi-party there, it doesn't mean political party necessarily. It means that there must be many people must be able to compete in an election. Okay. The second thing that the Constitution, the second constraint or limitation that we have, is that according to our Constitution, we have what is called a parliamentary system or a Westminster system of government. This is the same system of government that the United Kingdom has. The English colonized us, we took their political system. So what that means is that when we elect our representatives as people, as citizens, we elect the parliament, or we elect our legislatures. So at national level, it's your parliament. At provincial level, it's your provincial legislature. At local level, it's your local council or your district council. That's who we elect. Those people that we elect are then the ones who elect the president or the premier or the mayor. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, sure. So in our system, we don't elect the president directly. We don't have a system like Kenya or Zimbabwe or the United States or even Brazil now, they've just had an election, where you elect an individual directly to be the president, so that when you go into the poll, there's a name there that says president, so you elect an individual. No. We elect the legislature, right? So, there's 3 levels of government. There's the executive, there's the legislature, there's the judiciary. We don't elect executives. We only elect legislatures. There's different names for legislatures at different levels of government. At national government, it's Parliament, National Assembly and NCOP. At provincial government, it's the provincial legislature. At local government, the council is a legislature. That's who we elect as voters. The people that we then elect to those bodies are the ones who decide among themselves who is going to be the president or the premier or the mayor. Okay. So, and that's in the Constitution. So if we want to change that, we'd have to amend the Constitution. It's possible to amend the Constitution, but just to tell you that's... So if we wanted a system like, Justice Zondo recommended in his report, that we must be able to elect the president directly, it's fine. We can do that, but you need to change the Constitution first. Okay. So for making the Electoral Act constitutional, we have to accept the Constitution as it currently is. And the Constitution as it currently is says that we have what we call a parliamentary system, not a presidential one. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. Then the last thing that we have to accept, because it's in the Constitution as it currently is proportional representation. And what that means, yes, this one, I'm going to take a lot longer than 30 minutes, but I hope it's okay. I'll try to keep it to an extra 15 minutes, okay? Proportional representation is a system where, like perfect proportional representation, is that the number of votes or the percentage of votes that a party gets in an election is the percentage of seats that it will have in a legislature. So if you get 40% of the votes, you get 40% of the seats in a legislature. Not all electoral systems work like this, and I'll tell you more just now. But the reason why we have that system is because it's thought to be one of the most fair systems possible. And it allows a large part of a society to be represented. So, and it's basically this idea that the legislature must reflect the society that it represents. So Section 46 of the Constitution, Section 105 of the Constitution, and Section 157 of the Constitution. Section 46 deals with the election of the National Assembly. Section 105 deals with the election of provincial legislatures. Section 157 deals with the election of municipal councils. Each of these sections says that the election results, the results of an election, must result in general in proportional representation. So basically, that there must be some kind of proportional representation in our elections at all 3 levels, for national or for provincial or for local. Okay. Can we please put up that slide, the slide I'm speaking to now, just so everyone can see it? Yeah. And the slide before this one, please. And before this one. This one, okay. So that, thanks. So what that means is that we can't have an election system like the United Kingdom or like Zimbabwe, where their elections are like the elections that we have at ward level, a bunch of individuals. The one who gets the most amount of votes wins, even if that most amount is 30% or 40%, right? If you get the most amount of votes, you win, and then you represent that ward or that constituency. That's not how our system works. At local government level, we have a mixed system. So we have half what we call first past the post and half what we call proportional representation. But overall, the result is proportional. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, when we think about a voting system, because remember, the Constitutional Court has said that we need a different kind of election system. Well, the Constitutional Court didn't say that directly, but what they said, basically, the effect of the Constitutional Court judgment is that we need to design a different election system. So we need to think about what goes into an election system. We need to think about three things. The first one is the ballot paper. Do you get one ballot paper, or do you get two ballot papers? Or do you get 3 or 4? Whose names are on the ballot papers? Do you have the names of individuals, or do you have the names of political parties? Okay? Do you only just put an X next to the party that you want or the individual that you want? Or are you allowed to rank the names according to which one you want more? So in Ireland, they have a system of rank voting. So you get a ballot paper with the names of individuals, and then you say, Sis Nontando is the person that I want to elect the most, so you put number 1. Then you say, Umfundis is the second best person that I would want, so you put number 2. Litlohonolo is the third, then you put number 3 next to Litlohonolo, number 4 next to Stemble, etc. And then basically the person that gets the most number 1s is the one that wins. So it's possible to do that. You can also have a system where you have more than one vote. I know that sounds strange, but in Mauritius, in a ward, let's say, if there's 8 people, in Mauritius, their wards don't just have 1 seat, they have multiple seats. So let's say a ward has 5 seats in parliament. In Mauritius, you can vote for you can put an X next to all 5 names, or only 2 names. The people who get the most X's. So there's 5 seats in parliament. Let's say there's 15 people on the ballot paper. You need to put 5 X's. The people that get the most X's fill the 5 seats. Okay. So there's lots of different ways that you can organize a ballot. There's options. I'm telling you this not to confuse you, but just to say that there's many different ways that we can do things. Ne? So that's one option on the ballot. The second thing that we need to think about is the district structure. And here, this name district is confusing because of our system, but I want you to think of district structure as a ward or a constituency. Ne? You all know that a constituency is a geographical area where those people can vote for a particular representative. Our wards at local government level are constituencies, right? So one of the things that you need to think about is how many districts or how many constituencies are there, and how many seats represent a constituency. So at local government level, at ward level, we only have one representative per ward. Ne? Some countries, like I said, you can have 3, 4, 5 seats or people that represent a ward. If you think of our current system at national level, there's 400 seats in the National Assembly, né? And you think of the whole of South Africa as one ward, as one district, one constituency, and then the 9 provinces as their own constituencies. So in South Africa, we have 400 MPs representing 10 constituencies. Okay. We can make that different. There's lots of different options. The last thing that we have to think about when we create an electoral system is about the electoral formula. That basically means, how do you turn votes into seats? There's different ways of turning votes into seats. Like I said earlier, in a proportional representation system, the percentage of votes becomes the percentage of seats that you get. If you get 40% votes, you get 40% seats. In our local government level, at ward level, there's only one seat. You can't divide that seat into 40%, 20%. So at local government level, whoever gets the most number of votes is the one that gets the seat. The one seat, because there's only one seat that's available. But for local government, with the PR seats, it works like it does at national level. The percentage that you get is the percentage of seats that you get. The thing with local government, and it became a problem in Nelson Mandela Bay in 2016, is that the way that they calculate the seats is based on your overall percentage of the vote, not just what you got in PR or just what you got in the ward. So the ANC in 2016 got most of the ward votes. So the ward councillors were mostly ANC councillors. But because the total vote that it got wasn't more than 50%, it didn't get the majority in the council. Okay. So this is what we need to think about when we're making an electoral system. Next slide. So there are 3 types of electoral systems that we can think about that I've already started talking about. The first one is a plural or majority. Plural means that if you get the most votes, you win. It doesn't matter what number of votes you get, what percentage of votes you get. So for example, if the 4 people in the front row are running for election, Ubudi gets 40%, Sisi gets 30%, Mfundisi gets 20%, Ubudi gets 10%. The Budi with the 40% is the one who wins the election, even though he didn't get 50%. Okay. Majority means that you need to get 50% plus 1. Okay. Now, what's the advantages of that kind of system? Please, can we put the slides back up? The advantage of that kind of system is that it's simple. Winner takes all. That's basically what it is. It's also because you have to run that system with constituencies, with ward-like structures. It allows for direct accountability, because you are elected to represent a particular group of people, and and you have to account to them directly. You can't go, even if you're a political party member, the people that voted for you can still hold you accountable directly. That's what should be happening at ward level. It's not, but that actually is how the ward system is supposed to work. The other thing about it is that it doesn't lead to coalitions very often. It doesn't lead to coalitions, usually. So the government's quite stable, because it's a single party that runs. The disadvantages is that it excludes small parties. If you think about it at ward level, for example, even if you're an independent at a ward, it's very hard to win the ward because you're on your own in terms of resources and things. Very often that system excludes minorities. It usually excludes women because think about all the ward councillors. Do you all know your ward councillor? How many of you have a ward councillor who is a woman? How many of you have a ward councillor who is a woman? One. That's good. And she's your best. That's exciting. No, damn it. At ward level, most ward councillors are men because it's easier for men to run for election at that level, right? The other thing is that it can be quite a complicated system because it relies on drawing boundaries. The second kind of electoral system you can have is proportional representation, which we've spoken about. Benefit of proportional representation is that it's simple. You just vote for a party, and the party decides who goes on a party list, and then whoever's on the list goes into parliament, depending on how much the party wins. Proportional representation, the strict proportional representation, means that every vote counts. Because even if a political party, in the last election, a political party needed, I think it's 42,000 votes to get a seat in parliament. So that's why ATM, Al-Jamaa, ATM has 2 seats in parliament, I think. Even though it's a very small party. Ish cope, Shem. They're still holding on. So it allows for even very small parties to have representation. And that means is that it allows for parties that represent a small part of the population to be represented in parliament. It also, as I said, it encourages women's participation because it's the party that decides who goes on a list. So if you're the EFF, for example, the EFF, I think it had Julius as number 1, Floyd as number 2 on its list. And then from number 3, it had woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, until the end, until 400. So that the EFF in parliament is about 50-50. There's about 50% men, 50% women. It's about equal. Okay. Problem with proportional representation is that it usually results in a coalition government, which can be unstable. In South Africa, the fact that we haven't had a coalition government at national level since 1994 is the exception, not the rule. Usually coalition governments usually proportional representation leads to coalition governments. So what we're seeing in the metros, all the Gauteng metros in Nelson Mandela Bay, is how proportional representation actually works. Pasha, I know. But that's actually So what we saw in Italy, Israel, we see in Germany, that's usually what happens with a coalition government. And so that can be a problem. It can lead to there being many, many, many parties. In 2019, I think there were 48 parties that ran for national election. But I think we have like 350 parties registered with the IEC. And obviously, the biggest problem is that it limits accountability, because the MPs are more accountable to the party than to the people that vote. A mixed system, which is what we have at local government, tries to do the best of both worlds. So where half or 30% of the seats are through direct election and the other seats are through proportional. So it tries to do a mix of both. Okay. Next slide. The other thing now when you think about an electoral system, you need to think about the values that guide that electoral system. The values, in South Africa, the values that guide our electoral system were decided at CODESA, at the Constitutional Negotiations. And the decision was that the electoral system must be inclusive, so that all South Africans, as diverse as they are in language, in region, in race, in religion, can be included in running the country. It has to be fair. And by fair, it's not just that it needs to actually be fair, it also needs to look fair. People must think that the system is fair, okay, for the system to be legitimate. It has to be simple to understand, and that's linked to fairness, because if you understand the system, then it must have some accountability. The big criticism of our system is that it doesn't lead to much accountability. Okay, next slide. So, an important point to make here that I want to highlight here, and something for you to think about, is that, as I say, our electoral system was decided at the constitutional negotiations. All of the parties decided to have PR, proportional representation, and to have a closed list proportional representation system. There are some countries, like in the Netherlands, where voters can decide who they want to put on a party's list. So in the Netherlands, they have two elections. You have the first election to decide who you want to put on your party's list, and then the second election is to then vote for the actual party. In our system, political parties can design their lists however they want. Not even the IEC has a say. There is something about someone must not have been in prison in the last 2 years, but that's just about it. That's why, what's that? Kayton, yes, Kenny's friend, is now okay. So in our system, parties can choose, and the reason why that was chosen, for the white parties, the DA, sorry for using that language, but the one in 1993, the parties that were very white, the NP and the DA, they wanted that system because they wanted the PR system because it allows minorities to be represented, right? We wouldn't have as many minorities in our parliament if we had the same election system as Zimbabwe. Okay. Just the numbers don't work out. The ANC wanted the proportional representation. First, the ANC didn't want the proportional representation, it wanted direct election. But they were convinced to go with proportional representation, partly because it allows for a diverse representation and fits with non-racialism, but also because in 1994, most of the people that the ANC wanted to have in parliament weren't known by the people. they'd been in exile, or they'd been in jail. So if you had had a constituency election, like my grandfather lives in the same ward as Datu Sisulu. And as much as Datu Sisulu was admired, adored, he wouldn't have won the constituency election in 1994. Because there would have been somebody else that people knew that, you know how these things work. So for the ANC, it made sense to have proportional representation in 1994. But this was supposed to be temporary. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be the system that gets us through 1994, and we had an interim constitution in 1993, and then we're going to decide on a new constitution, and then we'll have a permanent election system. That didn't happen. So in 1996, the Constitution all it says, talks about is proportional representation. And then the election system is in Schedule 6, and that Schedule 6 is called Transitional Arrangements. It's meant to be temporary. And it says the election procedures apply to the first election of the National Assembly under the new Constitution. But then what happened is that the Electoral Act of 1998 just formalized that interim system into law. It made that the law. In 2002, when Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was the Home Affairs Minister, he then initiated a process to make new electoral legislation. Okay. Can we please go to the next slide? We've already talked about how it is that we vote. Next slide. Okay. And Minister Buthelezi put together the we call it the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission. The formal name is the Electoral Task Team. This was established in March of 2002. It was chaired by Frederick Van Zyl-Slabbert, and it was supposed to come up with a different electoral system, and especially one that would deal with this thing of accountability. How do we make MPs accountable to voters? The majority of the people that were on that electoral system recommended a mixed system. Basically, what that would mean is that the country would be divided into 69 constituencies. Okay? Based on the district structure and then dividing each district up into smaller pieces. And the reason why, so you know the district structure that we use at local government level, like Buffalo City Municipality is a district, né? And then there's like section, I think there's 3 sections in Buffalo City. Yeah, clusters. City of Johannesburg has, I think, 7, they call them sections in the City of Johannesburg. The idea was that it would be the same boundaries at local level as you have at national and provincial. And basically, 300, and what that was to do is to prevent a constituency from crossing 2 provinces. And you would have 300 of the 400 MPs in Parliament elected by constituencies, so directly, and 100 from proportional representation. Remember, I said that at local level we have half-half. I don't know how many councillors are in Buffalo City? Yeah, so in Buffalo, oh yeah, that's so nice. In Joburg, it's 270 councillors, so it's 135, 135. Here, it's 50-50, right? So what they suggested is that, no, actually, you must have more councillors, more MPs who are elected directly, and only 100 who are elected out of the list. what that would mean, think about it, if you've got 400 MPs but you only have 69 constituencies, and 300 MPs are going to be elected from the constituencies, it means that each constituency will have more than one MP, depending on the size of the constituency. They said that there would be 3 to 7 MPs per constituency, okay? And obviously, because the clusters are big, so you can't really have just one person representing a cluster. It's not like a ward. So the idea is that you would have multiple members of parliament in that cluster. So that's why, and those members of parliament would be elected, according to who got the most votes. So it would be possible for let's say the 3 MPs in this cluster to be 3 ANC MPs, but it would be just as possible for you to have 2 ANC MPs and 1 DA MP or 1 EFF MP, for example. Okay. Now, an important point to remember about the Van Zyl-Slabbert report was that it didn't talk about independent candidates. It didn't talk about individuals. It was still a purely party system. So on the ballot paper, the names would be of the political parties, not of the individuals. Okay. All right. Anyway, this was rejected. It wasn't, not even it was rejected. There was a majority view, there was a minority view. It went to cabinet, and cabinet actually just put it away. It was never discussed in parliament. It was never canvassed. It was never sent out to people. There was no civil society engagement after it had been passed. It was just put away. Fast forward now, then there have been all sorts of other attempts since 2003 to change the electoral system. Then we had floor crossing for a little while, remember that? And then that went away. And then the DA came up with a bill, a private member's bill, that went away. Former President Motlanthe in 2017, he had a panel that looked at reviewing certain legislation, and he just said, look, we must go back, we must use the Van Zyl-Slabbert system. No one did that. That was ignored. Musiwa Lekota in 2019 came up with an electoral system that was based on the Van Zyl-Slabbert system. That was ignored. Until 2020, the Constitutional Court says we need a new system. So Minister Motsoaledi decides in January of 2021. Well, I don't know when he made the decision, but he spoke to us in actually February of 2021. And he said, look, for government to create a new bill, so we have this thing in South Africa where Parliament, even though it's Parliament's responsibility to make law, Parliament usually waits for guidance from the executive. So Parliament asks the executive to amend the Electoral Act, then send it to Parliament to discuss, and as a bill. So that's what Minister Motsoaledi wanted to do. He decided he needed advice about how to do it, so he put together an advisory panel. Ministerial Advisory Committee. I was one of the members on that committee. I was the youngest member on that committee, which I reminded them of every day because I said, Nina, in 10 years, you'll be dead. I'm still going to be here. And so are all the younger people than me who this applies to. So there should be younger people, but anyway, I'm not a minister. So the chair of that committee was Vali Musa, was Vali Musa. Pansy Tlakula, who was the CEO of the Electoral Commission of the IEC. Norman du Plessis, who was once the deputy CEO of the IEC, Michael Sutcliffe, who was once the head of the Municipal Demarcations Board and the municipal manager of eThekwini Municipality. 1, 2, 3, 4. I was on the committee. Professor Daryl Glazer, who is a professor at Wits University. Advocate Vincent Maleka, who is an advocate in Johannesburg. And Dr. Nomsama Suku, who is a commissioner of the IEC. So we were the 8 members of the committee. We met and deliberated from February until June. We sent a report to the minister, I think on the 10th of June of 2021. So exactly a year after the Constitutional Court judgment. We tried to come up with one recommendation. Please, can we go to the next slide? We tried to come up with one recommendation for the minister. We could not agree. So we came up with 2 options. Dr. Nomsama Suku did not take a preference because she works for the IEC. She needs to implement whatever electoral system there is, so it wasn't appropriate for her to indicate her preference. So 7 of us basically voted, and 3 people, Advocate Tlakula, Norman du Plessis, and Michael Sutcliffe, agreed with option 1, which is a minimal change to the current system that we have. 4 of us agreed with option 2, which is basically using the local government system at national and provincial. So 4 of us said there's very little time to create a new election system. If we're thinking about inclusion, we need to have some proportionality. We have that at local government level with the half-half. If we think about simple and fair, most people understand the local government or were familiar with the local government system, so it won't be confusing to people. And if they are MPs who are directly elected by people, then that should help with accountability. We recommended a half-half, 200 constituency, 200 closed list. But what we suggested is that we need to add a provision for constituencies to be able to recall their MP. So if an election term is 5 years, at 2.5 years, if you are not happy, if enough members of a constituency are not happy with the MP, they should be able to trigger a by-election and have new elections just for their constituency and elect somebody else, which adds another extra layer of accountability. The option 1 was basically that there's too little time to change the system, so we must just use the PR system that we have. Remember, I said that you can think of us as having 10 constituencies, the nation and the 9 provinces. Ne? So you can treat the system as having 10 multi-member constituencies. And then all you do, so already what happens is that a political party, when they submit lists to the IEC, they submit 2 lists. One list is a national list. The other list is a provincial list. So it's people that come from the different provinces and are supposed to represent the province directly. And that's decided on, and how many representatives there are for each province depends on population. So, like if there's 200 people on that list, the Northern Cape, I think, has 10 seats that are for the Northern Cape in Parliament. That's how the system is in law. It's never worked that way. So I'm sure if you were to go to Parliament and you do a survey, most of those MPs live in Johannesburg or Cape Town or Durban or PE. But technically, you're supposed to have MPs that represent the whole country, or that come from a diversity of places in the country. So what this option said is that we must actually make the system work like it's supposed to work. And then what will happen is that independent candidates will be listed on their names. Can we go to just stay on the slide. That will just add the independent candidates onto the lists for the provinces. Now, and Diakbona says, you're looking at me like that sounds weird. And it is weird. It doesn't make sense. Because what it means is that an independent candidate can only run for 200 of the 400 seats in Parliament. It also means that an independent candidate needs more votes than a political party to get even one seat. The minister decided to go with option 1, not option 2. And it's option 1 that's been discussed in Parliament, which Letlogonolo will tell you more about. And so we are now in a situation where, can we go to the last slide, please? Or the second last slide? Not that one, the next one. So we're now in a situation where the change to the Electoral Act doesn't create any meaningful reform. It doesn't make it possible, really, for an independent candidate or an individual to be elected to Parliament or to the provincial legislature. The bill that's being discussed in Parliament possibly creates other constitutional issues. And the new kind of electoral system that was hoped for actually isn't going to exist. The other problem that we face is that if this bill currently does pass and is challenged at the Constitutional Court, we won't have any constitutional legislation to hold the election in 2024. Because the Constitutional Court said the Electoral Act is unconstitutional. So we need a constitutional electoral act if we want to have an election in 2024. So yeah, that's the crisis that, at this point, I don't like the language of crisis, but at this point I kind of feel like we might be getting to one. So this is why we are all here. Because we need to have more. There's been very little civic engagement on this bill. The parliamentary public participation process was 3 weeks? 2 weeks? Yeah, it was 3 weeks in March. And they didn't explain what was happening. So, yeah, so we need some kind of movement. We need to decide what's the way forward. Firstly, from now until the 10th of December, and then from the 10th of December until 2024. But then also, what's the way forward after 2024? Some people have suggested that we should add a sunset clause into whatever amendment is made now to say that this system will work for 2024, and then say we'll have a big process to decide on a new system that's more permanent after 2024. So what are the options? What do we want to do? Because as I say in that, and also that last bullet point, is that we need to make this process include young people. I'm so glad to be speaking here. This is there are the most number of young people of any of these forums that I've spoken to in this room. Because people under 35 are a full 1/3 of the country, 20 million, nearly 21 million people. This is you that it's going to affect. So, yeah, I'm going to end there. So sorry for taking so much time.
I'm so glad actually that you take that much time, because it preps us well for the conversation that we want to have in the commissions, right, by ourselves. But also, we would want to hear this kind of a conversation and input from somebody that has been in the room, in the conversation, that brings us insider information. Okay, so obviously, we cannot sit by and watch the process unfold and trust that somebody somewhere cares enough about us. Uyayibona ne? La nto yethu yoba siyodemobilize ukuthi masohlala endlini i-services yeza hlalani phani ithule nidiniwe. So we can't continue because ukuhlala phasi linde akusincedanga. Siyayibona ne? And the point of the matter is that our electoral process needs to change. We can no longer be looking at parliament or legislature ene 70-year-olds ezidiniweyo, ezileleyo, uyayibona ne? Something's gotta give. But also the notion of accountability, because at the core of the conversations we've always had, and the worst critique of our electoral process is its weakness in accountability. Siyayibona ne? Mosi xa ungekho embuthweni, awukwazi umbutho namalungu ombutho ukubamba to account. Uyabona ne? They account to i-constitution nezinye izinto zawo zapha embuthweni esizibonayo ukuba ngoku ziwiki. Uyabona ne? Nazo azisebenzeli. All right, so I'm going to ask this. Ndim ke ngoku ndicela lento apha in the room ne. This for us is a very important conversation, because for us this is about our future, and it's also about the future yabantwana bethu ne. This is about us governing. Very, very important. So I'm going to ask, so there's a few speakers who are going to come now. Onolo and organization My Vote Counts have been watching very closely the parliamentary process for us. Sifuna mositina ultimately to influence the parliamentary process. Sinyula tina abantu abaye parliament. So when we govern through them and we govern with them. So we ultimately are wanting to influence the parliamentary processes. So ndawucela lento ke kwezi speakers izayo. Ndiyacela ukuba please get off your device. It's destructive. Siyabona ne? Let's be present in the room. Be present, be here. Or if uke uxakeke kakhulu namhlanje, please go to the back and allow us space to engage ngezi zinto thina zisidlayo. Siyayibona ne? Do that for me. So Lihlonolo is going to come up. She's from My Vote Counts. Brilliant. Niyabona? Niyafunda pha kum? Niyanibona man ndisebenza ngabantu abatsha? Brilliant young people. All right, so Lihlonolo is going to come up, and following her directly, we're going to ask members of two civic movements. Ababazala maqabane brilliant man, la maqabane la anemivumba neziva. So la maqabane are in government as we speak, in opposition in two municipalities. Elinye qabane is from Stakespruit Civic Association. They have been in opposition as Stakespruit for a number of administrations now. And we want to learn from them. What has the implications of the Electoral Act have been What have their difficulties been? What would they like to see that would enable us as civics to play a meaningful and bigger role in governance, particularly in local governance as well? And so following Lihlonolo, we will hear from Ayanda and from Mrs. Nokzol. Thank you.
Molweni. Sure. All right. Let me just do this quickly. Because I'm tall. Yeah. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. My name is Litlakonolo Litsile, and I am from an organization based in Cape Town, My Vote Counts. So what we do is, Nantondo, he celebrated us so well. We really focus on making the political system and the electoral system more open so that people can really understand, these things that happen. Parliament, the National Assembly, and so forth, they tend to be, these things that are so far from us, but yet these are the people that we've elected and they represent us. So it's very important that we are able to get information from there and be able to influence the decisions, because ultimately they really affect us. So with regards to electoral reform, it's very important because it's a big deal. It changes how we vote and how votes are going to be calculated and how seats are going to be formulated. So imagine if we didn't have this discussion, and then come 2024, you walk into a voting station and you see a different ballot, something you've never seen. There's a possibility that there might be 3 ballots, 4 ballots. So you can imagine the shock that you are going to get simply because such an important process was not properly communicated. For instance, this system intends to include independent candidates to be able to contest at the national level and provincial level. This is something that we did not have before. So we need people to be aware of this big change so that it's really effective in that format. Thank you so much, Dr. Ste. That was a lot and very comprehensive. Some of the things happened in 1994, so you can imagine where some of us were. So it was a really good overview. So mine is just to sort of give an update as to what has happened. Dr. Ste left it for us where she said the minister had established a committee of the eight people that she was part of, and then they gave the minister a report. They were unable to get to a consensus themselves. I don't know whether if that's an indication really of the political will and the political landscape to say, we are divided on that issue, because we have that system at local government. So really, us trying to move it to national and provincial, will we really get more value? So I think it kind of gives us that sort of sense. So I'll start from there once the minister received that important report and where we are today. Awesome. Okay, so you said he received the report in June. So yeah, there were deliberations in the cabinet with his people. So also, the minister was still advised to go with the minority report. This was internal conversation as well with cabinet. So it was first the advice from the MEC, then he went and consulted with members of the executive, and they still went with the minority that Dr. Ste was referring to. So it was only this year, on the 10th of January, that the minister introduced the Electoral Amendment Bill, which is the Electoral Amendment Bill that we're speaking about today. So the minister introduced this bill, so it was based on the minority view of the MEC report. Remember, there were 2 views. The one view was that we really do not have to change the electoral system. We can just insert independent candidates to what we currently have, which it's very bizarre, because you have PR seats that are calculated on proportionality, and you are adding individuals. And as an individual, obviously, you can only attain 1 seat. So what happens to the surplus votes that you get because you are contesting with people that get a lot of votes but are able to get a share because they're a party? So the bill that the minister introduced proposed that independent candidates be included in the system and that there be no major changes to the system to accommodate them. So really, what this bill, when it was introduced, it just said the existing system, which is the PR, we are just going to have independent candidates contesting with the same sort of conditions. I'll speak to them more, but really, we do not need to change anything. Let's just move on. So then we quickly had public participation. I mean, you can think about it. We were already running out of time. The judgment was handed down on the 2020 on the 11th of June. So the minister only introduced the bill in January, and they only had 2 years to complete the process. So they were essentially left with 6 months to finish this when the bill was introduced. And you can imagine what legislation in South Africa, it needs to go through public consultations, in varied forms, written submissions, oral, and go everywhere to the corners of the country. But yet the minister only introduced the bill in January with 6 months left to the deadline. So I think it's important also to take note of the dates as Te was referring to, because it gives an indication of the short space of time that people had to engage with this important piece of legislation. So on the 8th of February, the portfolio committee, this is the committee that is handling the bill on behalf of Parliament. They opened the call for comments, and the deadline for the comments was on the 21st of February. So from there on, the committee adopted a nationwide participation program where the committee members visited 3 districts in every province to consult the public on the bill. So obviously, we understand that South Africa is a big country, so it can be impossible to get to some of the areas, but this was really insufficient, especially considering the nature and importance of the bill. So the committee had public comments from the 1st of March to the 23rd of March. So you can see how quickly everything is moving. There's so much pressure, we're running out of time. And this thing is so complex, but yet it's not reaching the people that it's meant to reach. As you go through the Parliament reports, ultimately they received 107 submissions, and there were only 13 oral submissions, which is very weird, because now there's issues of literacy and accessibility. So, because people who wrote to these submissions are obviously people who have access to email and so forth. So what about some of the people that were not able to articulate in this fashion? And there were also only 3 oral submissions. So these were conducted via Zoom. Remember, we had the pandemic, which really hampered this process immensely. So these is what they refer to as substantial submissions in their language. So it really means that even though they engage with other submissions, this is what they regard as substantial, or maybe something that they can take to really sort of influence and input into the bill. So this was the public participation early this year. However, even though Parliament, as per the Constitution, they are required by law to undertake a meaningful participation before passing a law. So it could be in any type of bill. You know about the expropriation bill. They've been going around the country. So this also was treated the same way. So, but however, there are issues with the. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah, the key issues in public participation. I think this is very important, so because it's going to feed into the nature of the bill that we have. Remember, when you have a bill, it needs to be, constitutionally in a position where it's going to be able to pass the constitutionality test. And by it having that condition, it needs to meet some of the requirements such as public participation. It's a must. It's not a favor that Parliament needs to come and engage us on these issues. They have to. So, but we really noticed some of these issues when we were monitoring the public participation earlier this year. The first issue, as I had indicated, that you please look out for those dates. The committee did not give enough notice to the public before the hearings. You know, I remember seeing a notice on the PMG website that there's a call for comments. These need to be in by the 21st of February, which was like 2-3 weeks away. They also issued a notice on the 3rd of March that the hearings would commence on the 7th of March. So you really have, 4 days to make sure that you are at the place that they're saying they're going to be. So we know there are issues of transport and organizing people. You need time for those kind of things. So really, my sense is that public participation cannot be meaningful if people are not given time to study the bill, consider their position. So before even getting to that, they needed to make sure that the contents of the bill are accessible. People actually know what the bill is about before even getting there, so that people are able to engage on the contents of the bill. So, but that information was not even shared before or prior. They just said, we are coming, we're going to discuss a bill. They even told people like 2 days before. So you can imagine the condition of that gathering and how it's going to be. Another issue was that the committee expected the public to comment on a high-level report. So in some of the meetings, they came holding the MEC report. You can imagine it's a large volume of a document that details the process and how they got to the 2 options. But they expected people to comment on that high-level report without like proper explanation and in-depth information. So people come to you and tell you, we've got the minority view and the majority view. This one is a mixed of a constituency-based system, and the PR, which is the majority view, and the minority view is that you are going to simply insert candidates into the existing system. When somebody tells you that, I mean, really, you need to get an explanation of what do those 2 things mean? What are the implications? So they expected people to really engage on that high-level report. I mean, they could have done short videos, summaries, or something really just to break down that dense information. So really, this was critical because people were not able to engage simply because they did not understand the contents of that report. So really, it did not add value to the process now because you're coming with this thing, but people don't understand what's inside of it. And another critical point, which really, some political parties bussed people across the country to attend the hearings and regurgitate the party's position. So you can imagine you are having meetings, so it's 3 meetings per district, but yet you are speaking to the same people that are passed all over, free rides, so that you can go and really sort of influence the meeting. So this doesn't help because now the whole point is to speak to different people and hear a variety of opinions. I mean, this is a critical matter. We are changing the electoral system. So how best can we do it? We need to include independent candidates. I mean, we've got an experience with independent candidates at the local level. So how best can we do it at the national level? Here's a bill that's been put on the table. It says we do not need to change the system. We can just include them to contest. So what is your opinion on that? But they did not give people the opportunity because now you had members of political parties influencing. So remember, they are just going to share what is on the party memo to say, this is what we want. So you cannot really say that was public opinion because now it was really influenced by politics. So really, essentially, the committee did not educate the public on the bill and the purpose of public participation. So this was a key issue in the bill. So you can imagine the consequences of people not understanding the bill and what it would mean for the bill that we have. Next slide. Cool. So the bill that we currently sit with is flawed, and for 3 fundamental reasons. The public participation, as I said, is required by law that Parliament does that. The public participation was inadequate, really. They did not give enough time for the public to really engage with the content of the bill, and they were supposed to do that. And the minister ignored the majority view of the MEC. And I think this is important because we might use the words majority and minority very loosely, but it's an indication that, the smaller people in the group said we do not need to change the system overhaul. We can just add independents to contest the same way, the same region, the same constituency. But the majority, which is the more people on the committee, said we can use the opportunity to change the electoral system. Remember, Dr. Stay was speaking about there have been attempts to change the system, and it was not even supposed to be this way in the first place. So here's an opportunity for us to really try and undo and fix for future generations. So let's try and try and do a constituency-based system where half of the seats will be calculated according to PR and half of the seats would be constituency-based. But the minister was not hearing it. So Parliament went ahead and endorsed the bill that's based on the minority view, which is the bill that we still have today since the 10th of January. So you can imagine there have been noise and contributions saying, you know what, it's not going to be possible to have independent candidates contesting at the same way as political parties. But there hasn't been much major changes to that. So, so the bill contradicts the Constitutional Court's ruling, simply because now you are going to have independent candidates contesting fairly. So you can imagine, we spoke about one of the important things about an electoral system, it's the district size. So meaning the sort of territory that you are going to contest. So with this system, what they are proposing is that provinces be used as regions. So political parties and independent candidates are going to contest like a region. So you can imagine such a huge province. Actually, I was looking as I was flying down here in Eastern Cape, like I saw other villages so far away, and then you come here. So as an independent candidate, without lack of resources, you are required to also contest the same constituency. So these are the issues of the using the same system for independent candidates and political parties. This is not workable, really. And the other fundamental issue as well, it's the number of seats. Because now, if you think about it, political parties are eligible to contest 400 seats, while independent candidates are going to be eligible to contest 200. So this is already an unfair advantage, if you think about it. So it's going to be really difficult. And it also really determines the share of the vote that's required. So for political parties, it's going to be easy for them to attain those votes that they need for a seat. But for political parties, it's just going to be very, very difficult. And another issue is some of these requirements that Parliament is putting, sort of barriers for independent candidates. They are saying that the bill requires that individuals who wish to contest the election secure 30% of the votes from the previous elections. So you can imagine if the seat, I think you said 42,000 votes gave you a seat, so you need to get 30% of that quota for you to be able to contest. I think that gives you 7,000 signatures that you need to prove that you are able to contest. But political parties, their threshold is at 1,000. Abafuni. Abafuni. And remember, with the IEC, you need to patala la deposit to be able to contest as well. So these are the requirements that are there. So really, we are sitting with a situation where it's really difficult for them to contest. Remember, we spoke about constitutional requirements, like ultimately whether we want to sing and dance about this bill, but there are certain things that we need to really abide by at the end of the day. And you mentioned proportional representation. So how is that going to look like when some people need to get 30% of the quota from last elections? Some people need to contest a bigger constituency with limited resources. How is that going to look like? And remember, and also another point that you also mentioned that I noted down was, our system, Parliament elects the other arms of the state. So now, if the Concord gave independent candidates, that right to be able to do that. But these conditions are limiting for them. So are they not going to be in that room to make this decision? So really, what is the constitutional condition here? Because they're not meeting it with the current bill. And the other is multi-party, and I'm glad you also mentioned it as well, that you need different people in the room. So we really can't have the same people making those decisions for us. So the bill as it currently is really not workable. There's been many attempts by civil society, ourselves, and many others. We've written to the Portfolio Committee to raise these issues that the bill is flawed because of these three fundamental reasons. One, the public participation was not enough. You needed to engage with people on the bill, let them communicate and say, this is the type of system that we wish for, this is the best way that we think we can be able to vote for our elected representative. I think that would have definitely benefited the bill. It would have fed into the bill that we have today. So from January until today, the bill hasn't changed that much. It has been, those minor constituency cosmetic changes, especially on the signatures. They've been trying so hard to take it down. Some are saying, no, there's no need to take it down because there's a potential that anybody can wake up tomorrow and contest to be an independent candidate. So we need to be able to safeguard against that. So those are some of the reasons that they've put forward. What's wrong with what? Somebody waking up? No, they're saying it's a threat. It's a threat, maybe to the press. So yes, there's been those issues. So the signature, I think it has gotten to 25% the last time I attended the portfolio committee. So it has been those things. But the constituencies, they remaining. You are expected to contest a region as big as Gauteng. So you can imagine there's such different things going on there. I don't see how a person from Centurion is able to relate to somebody who's in Orange Farm in terms of understanding. And the big issue of accountability, how are you going to be able to hold that elected representative accountable if the constituency is that huge? Those are the challenges that we have with the bill, and we've raised them countless times, and we're running out of time. The bill is supposed to be completed, the process is supposed to be completed by 10th December, but the portfolio committee is still working on these. They did open a call, I think it was 3 weeks back, on some of the issues in the bill, but what the particular thing is that they were not interested in these issues that we have with the bill. So it was just minor things, definitions, to call a person a natural person. What is a natural person? You'll be so shocked if you attend those meetings. They really discuss the most mundane things, but they did not really critically engage with these three issues that we've been saying. So they opened a call to say, make comments, but don't make comments on the substantial issues. Make comments on these other things, like the signatures, definitions, and things. So you had people that did, but I went through those comments. People still lamented at these. I think 80% of the comments from the second round, which was 3 weeks back, still really lamented to say this bill is flawed, it's not going to work out, it's not going to meet the constitutionality test because it's not going to result in general proportionality. It's unfair for independent candidates. The condition is it's not conducive for independent candidates to actually do anything about it, because now, as an independent, you get the votes that you require for a seat. For example, you need 44,000 seats, but if you had gotten 80,000, the other seats, the other votes get, shifted. They go into a pool. Initially, they had said once you meet the required votes, the votes that you need, 44,000, you get a seat, you sit down, and then the other votes they get wasted. They don't count for anything. So you can imagine in a country of ours where people have voted for you, but once they meet those 44,000, they throw it away. But as the deliberations went on, they're like, no, voting is important. You can't say once you've reached that threshold and then people must do away with the votes. They're not going to matter. Because essentially, you can't donate them to someone else, Kaloku, because you are one person. But with the party, I need there are many, so they can just share amongst themselves and getting there. But as an independent, you are not. So if you want to share the vote, for example, you had 44,000 and you end up getting 88,000, you were supposed to be a political party if you wanted to come with you and your friends. So some are interpreting this as a way as you are essentially forcing us to be a political party, because now, once I reach that 44,000 and then I have extra, then I will put the extras. Now that's why we had Musi the other day, Argimang Bosa or something like that. Yes, because he was trying to contest as an independent candidate, but this bill is challenging that. So hence, he's going to, contest as a party, and then inside these independent candidates, it's a lot, but it's really in response to the bill and what's going on in Parliament. So people might not really understand it, but it's very closely related because these are the issues that they are facing with the bill. So we pressed for time, ne? Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's sort of what's happening. And then there'll be implications. I think Uste was also mentioning that, if the Parliament were to adopt the bill in the current fashion that I had explained, there's a risk of constitutional challenges. So you can imagine that civil society and other people will lodge an application, based on these fundamental flaws of the bill. I think they are valid and they are worth pursuing because now they really have an impact on the electoral system that we are going to have. So this could have an impact on the free and fair elections because essentially we don't have an electoral system and we have elections very soon. So what are we going to do about it? So this is what we need to engage with today and see how we can press on for Parliament to do what's right by us. The deadline is 10th of December. By the look of things, they might ask for an extension because they haven't even gone to the lower house. So it's still within Parliament and they still have to go to the NCOP. They have to do the same process of public participation on their level. They haven't even done that and we are in October. So yeah, that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Amandia ati masala, hlaka-hlakene. But we'll weave through it. This is what we do. We press for time, and I do want to call the two colleagues to really reflect very quickly on their experiences. And I'm sorry, comrades, but I'm going to ask you to take 5 minutes each. Sis Nokuzola, may I see you and may you approach the podium, please. Diabathanda ke ababantu, ababantu bathe besulawulweni bafika bafumana omnye umasipala pha one-clean audits. That's all we know most about this. Clean audits. And whether that translates to effective service delivery is something else. Hathi ke clean audits yena sibaleka naye because ke azikho ninzi izinto ezinhle esibalwa ngalo siliphondo. So ke clean audits lo siyamclaima. And so for you guys to have been in government in Sengu, in opposition, and still the city or the municipality maintained clean audits, even with you in council. And the agitator has been quite an interesting one for me, and we're looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Mama. Greetings to all. As Umama Unontando has already introduced myself, I am Mrs. Nokuzola Pama from Stexplate Civic Association. First of all, let us thank the organization for inviting us to come and share our experiences. We've talked about elections. I'm worried that we have dwelled much on electoral acts. I'm worried who is benefiting from this act, because our communities have got less interest in elections due to many reasons. Some of them, they don't know the importance of voting because they don't see any changes after voting. For example, why did we decide to come and play in quick space, so advocate for the people of Stexplate? As Umam Nontando have alluded that there's a clean audit in our municipalities, but our communities are not happy about the clean audits because they don't see services delivered to them. That was the main reason that we stood up. We've got these clean audits. We don't have water. We don't have access roads. Even health systems, our health systems are failing. So people, they don't see need for going to the polls and exercise their rights. As civic movements with political interest, we are trying to gain back the interest of the people towards e-voting, because we know that their vote counts. If we are sitting back, not participating, those that are in ruling party will do whatever they like with us as communities. Whilst we are there in the council, we make sure that they stick to the acts. They don't just pass the agenda without quoting the acts. That is how some of the activities are accounted for. Before they just without advocating or discussing the matter. And when they said my well, we asked them which section are we referring from. If we're not there, they will just do as they please. It's my well. If you ask them what is welling, they don't know what is welling, but my well. So I'm happy that you said you want the young blood to participate, so that they understand the acts and the laws that governs the country. Omama Upama are aging now, and at times we are lazy to read. We want young blood to read and understand and to interpret the laws as it is, so that to overcome these corruption issues. Because the administration can ruin your mind, because they know that you are not reading. They will just come and say, this budget must be approved. Hey, my well, and anbonanga bani nanisbethile ngapha ku my well. We can say now, in Sinku, we fight there. It's not easy to take decisions there. We even take out our shoes and with our bare foot to fighting for the right things to be done. At times, some of the agendas are taken out because they know that the opposition won't allow this. So I want to say, Mamnontando has said, Sanikwa, democracy, saitata sainikezela. After sinikezele sahamba sayohlala. Abantu besingu babaya yenza lento esifuna bayenze. They have tended to neglect us. It's hard for the councillors to account the people. Abantu abana lwazi ngenkqubo zikamasipala uba kwenzeka ntoni kwamasipala. Only the opposition parties, social movement with political interest, who has that power to go and address the people what is happening inside the council. And what had happened, this social media platform, Facebook, iyambonisa ngoku umasipala waseSingu, because everyone has interest in Doba. We sit here 22 siya council, and there's a council meeting. The committee will go and sit to Facebook. Babone pha bathi hayi lo uyaqhuba lo akaqhubi. Iyenza ke ngoku into community ngoku iphinde iyazi into reason why besiya beyovota. Xa ndizawuhlala uthe singalityi ixesha. Into esicingela into ba ngoku silekishe kuyo, voters education ayisenziwa ngendlela eyiyo, and yenziwa ngendlela into abantu banesizathu sento ba mabangasifundisi. Uba bendimamele phayana uDr ebepresenter apha uthethile ngento yokwazi into kuba kubalulekile kubaleke kangakanani uvota. And if abantu badikiwe yile system yebesibambile yoba sivotela the ruling party, i-ruling party ayisenzeli kakuhle currently because they are not accounting to us. Kunzima into yoba umholder accountable ukansila ubuze into yoba indlela yenziwa nini. Uzokuxela into yoba account kuwe accounta embuthweni wakhe, of which is true, and she can't run away from it. Umele ba account pha. But leya independent candidate, lelinye iswazi esibethwa ngalo into yoba maba remain in power, because bayayazi into yoba we can't reach that threshold. Sibonile ke thina abantu ba contesta kwi local government. Kunzima kwa into yoba uwine iward, uyi-ward candidate, uyi-independent candidate. The only independent candidate that managed to win iward, candidates independent ezispayiweyo to go and act as if they are independent. Then they managed to win. There's no independent candidate that can win. Yes. So, yes. Ithethe ke into kokubana le presentation yenziwe ngexesha eli-right ebantwini aba-right. Ithethe into yoba ke ngoku let us go out and educate our communities. Abasele bengenamdla wovoto. Indoba, even if you don't want to vote for the ruling party, go and change your vote, vote for another party, rather than sitting. What we have experienced in the previous elections, you'll find out 300 people, 3,000 people are in the voters' roll. Only 500 will go and vote. It shows us that there's lack of education. So you must go and educate Ababan. For Indoba Mabatini, Mabapinde Baiwele, it's not yet uhuru to our communities. Enkosma. I'm turning the podium over to you, Comrade Ayanda.
Yeah, Namandi Bulise comrades. Please receive my warm greetings. Amandla, Ngawethu. Nam Sisnondan, I think it's quite important to appreciate and the work that has been done by both the organization and my vote counts, and the fact that you have extended the invitation to us. I think to me the reality of the matter is that we are locked in a political system. When I say political system, I mean the system of political parties. And it is a system that has really failed us. It is a system that is in crisis. It is a system that has failed this country. It is a system key that is not accountable. Just to make a very glaring example, when I go, many of us are not members of political parties per se, but when they want our votes, they don't go and campaign to members of political parties. They campaign to the citizens of this country because they want our vote. When they go to the national legislature, when they go to the provincial legislature, when they go to these local chambers, local council, then they take a mandate from the political party. They only account to the political party. We are literally nowhere in the picture. As Nondando was saying, we must go kaya fold our arms. Fanon uses the term of the caves, that we are sent back to the caves. We will only matter during elections again. So something ought to be done. And I think this electoral reform seeks to respond to that, of that what can be done, what it is that to be done, because we can no longer, or we cannot forever be prisoners of a failed political system in this country. And again, it asserts our rights as citizens of this country to say we must not matter only when it comes to voting. We can be voted equally as citizens of this country. But again, there have been examples of these individuals contesting at a local level. I know in Lambe, I think it's Ward 4, Uzeik Nglingo, who contested. People were very clear that, and there have been quite a number of such cases, that we want Zake Nglingo to be the candidate for the ANC. And the ANC will say, we don't want Zake Nglingo, we want somebody else. And in that people said, no, then you can go ahead with whoever you want. But as people of this we will vote for him, we will collect money, we will register him. And indeed, he won. Now, I think that's very key, That's very important, that's very fundamental, that's very significant. But when it comes to these national elections, we are not given that choice. We don't even know, we just know we are voting for a political party. As who are you voting in a political party? It's not your business, it is a business of that political party. There's been a similar case, I think it was, if my memory serves me well, in UNIC, I think it was Andile Qabi. Comrades would remind me, was it Andile Qabi, Ward 42, where they went there and the heavyweights of the top 6 of the ANC, they said, we don't want him. They were given a different or an alternative candidate. People said, but we said we want Andile. The top 6 dissent in UNIT, they forced to say, we are going to take this candidate. And the people were very clear. They voted for the candidate of their choice. I think this kind of an expression is quite important, but because it is part of democracy. It is part of democracy. We might not be really quite interested what happens there, but for the mere fact that community is able to say, you will not force Ayanda Kota to us. You will not dictate terms to us. The point that Comrade Loliwe makes, the issue of voter education. I mean, when people have these alternatives, the question of voter education becomes important. That's why this bill, the question of hearings, submissions, oral submissions, and key voter education becomes important. Because once you are informed, you know that you've got alternatives. You make at least sound decisions. You make sound decisions. But if you are not informed, you don't know what alternatives do you have in your disposal. Then it's quite easy for political parties to bull us. It's quite important to think narrowly and not realize that there are quite other alternatives that we have. And I mean, look here. I might not remember vividly the numbers, but the voter turnout in this country has been an apathy. So with this electoral reform, I think it's something that we should welcome. It's something all of us should work towards. It's something that we should do the campaign work and the lobbying work. And as Comrade Lulu was saying, key, the question of education, and key, the question of participation. It must not only be a matter of what the Constitution, the Concord says. It must also be a matter, how do we influence the Concord decision? And once we have influenced that, the Concord decision, our participation on the ground. So I'm saying, look here, we don't have blueprint. Life, unfortunately, doesn't offer us formulas, right? But we are quite excited by these alternatives that we have to say, we are quite excited. We are going to work with what we have. In making it a point that, I mean, when we grew up, we understood and we knew democracy to be the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. But now democracy, it is the work of the political predatory, the political elites. So I'm saying we should be quite excited. We don't have blueprint. We don't have something that's perfect. There are no formulas. But as we forge ahead, we will construct, deconstruct, learn and learn up until we arrive where we want to go. Thank you very much, Ms. Nondang.
Put Ayanda is with the Unemployed People's Movement, and they're organizing and moving predominantly in the Eastern Cape and in other parts of the country. So thank you for that. Press for time. I want to open the floor now for a conversation because kudala ni mamele. We've heard a couple of things today. We've heard that we've heard the history of our electoral process. And we know that the arrangement and the mechanism that we have was meant to be an interim arrangement. We have also heard ukubana ngenxa yemeko izinto ezingayo. People have begun to agitate for independence outside of political parties to have representation in parliament and in the provincial legislature. We have heard ukubana there is a bill that is sitting before parliament sponsored by Home Affairs, and that this bill has opted or elected to go with a minority view, ethi nje ukuba leave the structure intact, usumana uqheba nje pha ngaphandle uqhola amaphepha very periphery changes, but otherwise leave the thing as is. And the majority had said, this is an opportunity for us to do that thing that we have always been trying to do, and to do it now well. We have an opportunity to do that. Lithonola tells us that there is a process in parliament that has had public hearings and all sorts of other things that's trying to push this bill through because there is a deadline to this bill and 2024 is around the corner. So if le basi iyahamba. So there's a couple of things we are trying to do here, ne? Le plane isemoyeni. They're trying to fix it. Nathi silapha siyayibona ma izayowa phambili ngangawi ngoku, but izawapha phambili, and we do not want to have that. And so the idea is for us to come together, to put our minds together, and to think up at Eastern Cape. We were very intentional in who we brought into the room here. We brought people that have power and agency into this room. So nina apa, you are what we call Tina people's power apa province. There are similar conversations across the country. We wanted to start this conversation with you apa province, so that's vumelane apa ukuba we do want to plug in to this national civic movement that's emerging around electoral reform. So at the core of it, in commissions, we want to agree, okay, how do we engage this thing? What are we engaging? How do we want to engage it, right? So that's a conversation we're going to have in commission. So I thought, let me summarize it so that uba ubulahlekile along the way, washiyeka uyabona, ukhawuleze usifumane. So for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to open the floor for commentary, for specific questions. Uste is going to leave us some time this afternoon. So ngoku esekhona, if there's specific questions to her, please pose those questions. I know that we're live streaming to the audience that's joining us virtually. Finally, I turn to you. Thank you so much for connecting and welcome. If you have questions, there are people in the room here who will indicate to us, and we will bring your questions into the room. All right, now I'm ready for hands. One. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay, where do I start? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That first round for now. Okay. Fanny? Do I have roving mics? Okay. I don't think you're on. Okay.
All right, that mic doesn't seem to be working. All right, we're back on.
Oh yeah. Enkosi Sihlalo. Ndine comment ndinemibuzo. Mandiqale ngombuzo. Ndicela ubuza. Right ngothetha isintu ne? Yeah. Ngufani ncaphayi. Ndicela ubuza ku doc. Indoba intoni le ibangele kuhanjwe neluluvo legcuntswana kula committee. Ndifuna acinge beyond eza discussions zabo bona. Intoni le ibangele, because there is obviously outside forces ezikhokelele kulonto. Lonto ke indisa question or comment iqala ethi I think funeka xa sixoxa apha sizibuze umbuzo engicinga uba ngumbuzo omkhulu othi aphi amandla kwimo yezopolitiko apha eSouth Africa. I'm raising lento kuba kukho le point and ne-experience endifuna into yoba sicinge ngayo xa sicinga ngalo mbuzo. Abantu have been making submissions, various initiatives karhulumente zokutshintsha umthetho, but yeyiphi iview edla ngophumelela? Have as submissions been taken seriously? So the question is, aphi amandla? Then the other question for me is, who has the resources to influence these processes? Because singana independent candidates zibe ne support kangangoko. Sivile into ba kukho already there kukho imiqathango ebekweyo into ba xa uyi independent candidate nazi izinto oqualify for zona nazi ungaqualify kuzo, and requirements more for independent candidates than political parties. So the question is, who has the resources kwezinto ezi esibangela into ba i-processes zihamba ngohlobo oluthini? So ndiyarhala mna into ba ke we may not discuss it now, kodwa ke it's a question endithi saba siyaziqhatha into ba si-ignore into ba aphi amandla kwezi nkqubo ezi.
Thank you, sir. Number 2.
Manibulise kumuntu ongokhona. Ndingukoki Shipani, Stake Spirit Civic Association. Hey, manibonge nami uba masibe khona apha. Okokuqala nje bethuna Stake Spirit akho clean audit. Iyaphekwa. Iyaphekwa clean audit because awusoze ube ne clean audit then i-delivery ngabikho. Ungaya Stake siyahlupheka. Okwesibini oko kukhona opposition party ezininzi azideploya nezi ward councillors. Why zingadeploya nazo? Because zawuveza lamanyala abawenzayo. Okwesithathu ngiyabonga Dr. ubekhona. Masike silungiseni uIC bethuna. As presiding officer silimala apho. Okokuqala nje yenziwe sithi lento thina abasuka kwa ANC sayibethelela ba i-presiding officer mayibe nguprincipal wapha esikolweni. And nxa sike sisithi kubantu bethu nibabiza zintoni aba bagada i-party agent. I-party agent funeka ibe ngumuntu onomdintsi. Because uba unamdintsi, zawudliwa ii-votes zakho. So ndicinga zazo nto yazi uba u-IEC uba angatshintsha le system acinga uba ukuze i-presiding officer funeka kube nguprincipal wesasikolo, funeka kube ngubani. Hayi mayitshintshwe bethuna. Litshonile ilanga, inkosi.
Nkosi Teta. Number 3.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm Siyabonga Mabandla, SRC from the University of Fort Hare.
Oh, welcome, Siyabonga. Thank you for coming.
All right, thank you. I just have a few questions. Number one, in terms of Section 47, subsection 3 of the Constitution, it reads, a person loses membership of the National Assembly if that person ceases to be a member of the party that nominated that person as a member of the Assembly, unless that member has become a member of another party in accordance with Schedule 6A. Now, I want to note the implications of this amendment on that section of the Constitution. Secondly, in as much as we have a very good example with the local government regarding the electoral system for independent candidates, but I'm particularly worried because if you look at that system, it's extremely difficult to remove a ward councillor from their seats. Now, how are we going to ensure that we really give people power, not necessarily choice? Because now I think we are more giving them choice to elect independent candidates, not necessarily power to hold them accountable. That's why even communities even resort to banning the houses of those councillors or even killing them to force by-elections. And also in these deliberations, I think I heard a bit about the cost implications of having these by-elections because of how but also what is missing, I think, is the issue of the 4IR, which is the fourth industrial revolution, now that we are given an opportunity to overhaul the whole system of elections, but we're not talking about the 4IR, which will save us cost in terms of going to elections because we know the amounts of ballot papers that need to be printed and other admins which could be saved through fourth industrial revolution, and yet we're not using this opportunity to also introduce 4IR in the upcoming voter education. Those are just my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Spoken like a young man. Thank you. Yeah. Number 4. Uloliwe.
Thank you very much. Masibulele ka-offices kosibiza sibe lapha sonke iyasichaphazela le nto. Mandiqale nje doctor ngizama ujonga into yoba ndiyayazi mos into yoba when a word says I belong, it's either you are a member or you are inspired. So you might be inspired, but I want to check. You might be inspired politically. Ikhona political party yakho noma indawo na oyithandayo. Ndifuna nje sijonge into apho. Ingaba was it strategic that we didn't hear any very strong point from the political parties on this matter? It was silent on the media, very silent. Is it strategic? I'm raising this question because all judgments that went to Constitutional Court, La Mosa judgment, the state wanted 24 months, and within that 24 months, they've done nothing. Is it strategic? But the moment you electoral lapse, normally court take judgment. I'm not sure because the judgment that is available is totally right not to vote in 2024. That's not true. I mean, there is a time for voting. So even if the political party will win, that's why they choose the first option. But my point is, ngoba nje uthanda nawe ngabe mhlawumbe uthe wawusensa nalo uyithandayo wathi yiyo le nto ibanga ibinganqoli. I'm checking that. The second issue, ndiyayithanda le nto raise my brother, but my problem is that if you look on our socio-economic condition in South Africa, abantwana abaninzi bayeka isikolo. Abantu abaninzi South Africa bafunda, particularly abantu basezilalini. Now, if you talk of advanced electoral processes, it means many people will lose out.
and it deliberate into about there is a difference between an electoral education. That one is driven by the state, but the popular education is driven by the progressive forces. So the two must not. We have to understand. We don't have a responsibility. Vote. Ours, as progressive bloc, is to educate people about the importance of voting, and the two are different. That's the popular education. Last but not least, you have raised something again about Nelson Mandela counting. Was it an error of application? Nelson Mandela. Can you vote at Nelson Mandela? There was something that you both are Sonia and you votes as Nelson Mandela.
No, but Nelson Mandela, even though the ward most of the ward councillors, that's Nelson Mandela, are ANC. But Nelson Mandela, but the ANC doesn't control.
Yes. Okay. So there was no error in any way? Okay, so fine. No, I think I've raised my question. And my worry is, I was entertained by the presentation of various international elections. My worry once again is our level of illiteracy in South Africa and how, if we think we will take this second option, how we are going to educate our people to understand it so that people do not lose votes. There are people that have lost votes because they were ANC members, but because they were illiterate, they vote for another party, which was not their choice. There are many independent people that have lost their votes because there is no proper, our levels of
Thank you. There was a hand, I think it was yours, my brother, no? No, yeah. It's coming right here.
All right. Some of what I was going to raise also were kept cut, also by Comrade Loliwe on the systems of elections, and to say how can we simplify them in our communities, especially the rural community. Yeah, but also I wanted to just comment on this issue of the system. Yeah, I know. Just in these past elections, I am aware that the ANC was trying to shift some way. Muntlante way, by the way. I think it was recommended by former President Muntlante that they must go to the communities. But in a way, how they did that, it was more of they were trying to flout these processes, you know. Yeah, like Comrade was saying that maybe the community would elect this one, and at some point they are going to flout that for their own candidate. Yeah. Somewhere they lost, by the way, somewhere they won. Yeah, I can even attest to say that my ward from 2016 to this past elections, it was more of the same situation. That the candidate that we elected within the pen of the NC, they said in 2016 by that time that he was unfit and he has been not serving in the movement, is not active in SATU while he was the president and all those things, you know. And they even raised the issue of his criminal issue, many things. But now when we're coming to these elections again, but as maybe processes were trying to be made, at least be friendly to him. Again, they rejected him, but the people were for him. But seemingly he was very afraid to be an independent candidate. Yeah. So there are many issues around those things. Yeah. Also, again, I'll check and on the issue of what committee elections. You would find also that people do not also get to manage this process on their own. These people come with their own volunteers. They are volunteers who are working for the movement and knowing exactly when they are working, that will be made ward committees. And when there are times that they come to the communities to allow communities to elect their own people, they are having these people. And somehow, if you are organized in your own committees, they would even try to run away from the venue and have their own little thing so that they can have those candidates. That is an issue. Lastly, there's an issue that Mauma Mawase talked about of independent candidates. I think it happened in Bloemfontein around. There was an MCA that had many votes and there was in inter-council as an independent, but somehow they were managed to pursue by Ebo Mahashule and others that you are comrades, by the way. We had some disagreements, and somehow it turned even on other parties that he allied with in the council and came back to the ANC with their votes, and the ANC now is ruling them. Yeah, so those are the things. It's very complex, this thing. Yeah, it needs us to look at all angles on it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think there's two hands here, Kala Kutata and then Mfundisi Qobasa.
Enkosi mem nomhlangano wonke. Mna ndinendawo nje ndibhideka kuyo mhlawumbe ndicinga uba ndingaphinde ndicakiselwe further. Le ethi ndiyivile into ethi mhlawumbe umthetho lo oye wagweba ukuba makutshintshwe isystem. Ububona le proportional system le kusetyenzwa ngayo into yoba inengxaki in terms of uvalela individual as a voter to have the benefits. Now, apho ingxaki yam ke ifika ibe khona ke ngoku yinto ethi ingaba is still the system ebangela into yoba i-independent candidate should have 200 seats instead of 400 as political parties have that benefit. Is it the judgment of the law or the system that makes that? Or perhaps mhlawumbe ingaba how can we, or again the law, open the doors of the independent candidate to have the same number of seats as per the political organizations? I'm stacking on that because we've got to go here having a clear mind as to what is it that we need to advocate and tell the people.
All right, I'm with you, Ted. I'm with you.
Thanks very much, Tando Mandibulele. I think I'm going to be very short because quite a number of speakers here have covered some of the things I thought I should raise or comment on. But first, I think on behalf of the church with the capital letter C, I do want to appreciate the invitation again and the opportunity for this great and wonderful engagement. We truly appreciate, and it's just our hope and prayer that it's not going to end today and here. Maybe it's going to be continuous. I'm saying this because I want to lament two things, Dan. One is what you alluded to earlier on about us as civil society being, or as a people, being demobilized after 1994. Or us having demobilized ourselves. Noba yeyiphina kwezinto zimbini. Egameni lokokuba services are going to be delivered like a box of pizza being delivered at your doorstep. Isenzakalisile ke lonto. I think sisibona sikulento sikuyo ngoku ngenxa yalonto. The second one is what many speakers are calling it voter education, which in my own little vocabulary I want to call it a civic education. Because when I say it's voter education, to me it gives a sense that when 2024 is coming closer, we start to see everyone busy trying to teach everyone about how to vote. I don't think it makes sense. It has to start early and not focus on how necessarily to deal with the voter's role. Because voter education, in my own understanding, it's only that people are arriving and show you how you must deal with the voters' role so that you avoid ballot paper, I mean, sorry, not voters roll, ballot paper,
paper.
how you must deal with the ballot paper so that to avoid ukumosha ballot paper. That's only what we deal with. But if we were to take it back into civic education, start telling the people about these issues that were raised here by Dr. Stembele and others that were speaking here, it would make us a better nation. Help us to go back to that space, because we need to get there so that sizokwazi ukuzinceda kwezi ngxaki zininzi esijongene nazo esihlangabezene nazo apha. You know, I'm becoming a little bit frustrated to see how people we have elected and put them into power leave it to manipulate us when we want to liberate ourselves. Because in every effort that I've been listening to here, people are trying again to do what they did. Because no one has liberated us. The people liberate themselves. And even in the circumstances, people still have that power to liberate themselves. So it says, therefore, in my own way of suggestion, as I would want to sit down, I think I agree with Umzalwane Mabandla. Let's be deliberate, kulendo of trying to move with a speed of utilizing what is at our disposal, like the 4IR. Yiyo ezawusinceda, because lento nithethayo about the coalition governments and other things, yes, negatives ne-positives zayo, but uyawuqaphela okokuba iyenziwa amandla ngento ba people badecide into ba mabahlale phansi bangayi uyovota ngenxa yesizathu ko sonke sizaziyo. Then ndandike nda-engagewa ke kwa-IEC for some reasons. Babe nento ababeyithethe ndingayazi uba inyanise kangakanani. Ethi whether uyavota noba udecide ungavoti uvotile. If you choose to stay at home and not go to vote, uyafana nalo uye kwi-ballot box wafika wavotela loo nto ayivotayo. Kodwa uba besingaphakama, we would be able to make South Africa a better country. Sibe ezi zingxaki sinazo. You know, it is going to happen nakubani noma ndingandivotela nam ndingumfundisi. Noma ndingandivotela, kodwa uba nizawuqhubekeka nenze le nto niyenzayo ukuthi xa nigqiba ukundivotela nithi hamba ngaloo mandla. Nam ndizawufika phaa ndisebe ndiyenze whatever endifuna ukuyenza. For as long as i-society yethu ingakwazi u-engage ifundiswe okokuba don't just give people blank checks to go and ngaloo mandla banawo, as the scripture would say, but let these village challenges beziraiswa even nangumama from Stegspruit, that the challenge is that xa siyofundisa abantu ngevote sikhangela wonke umuntu, but xa sele ndifikile phaya ndiyazazi uba ndiakhawunta phi. Masilungise ezo zinto zize zinokwazi usibeka ezindaweni. Thank you very much.
Enkosi kakhulu mfundisi. We are going to turn it back to the speakers. We'll bring the mic to you. And I do want to highlight this. We were very deliberate in inviting Koinonia here. I believe very strongly ukuba kule ndawo sikuyo, we need to build a movement from below. Ezicaweni kukho i-audience yabantu abaya willingly ba every Sunday, hundreds of them willingly bayaziyela ba bathunywa noma kuyanetha willingly ba audience. Bahluphekile ababantu. They are also agitating, bayafuna ukwenza into qha baqinisekanga uba mabenze ntoni njani. Uyabona ne? Now, working with this movement, sine access through them to those hundreds of abantu in many villages across the province and other parts of the country, abakhoyo pa abayi audience. So we need to be strategic as a city. We are building. Siqiniseke uba sakhanjani, sakhanga bani, sakhanga ntoni. And so I know uba kwezinhlangano zethu zamaqabane akuvamanga uba sihlale nabefundisi. And so it's important that we understand who we are and where we're going, and that kwesi struggle sikuso asikwazi ukuqalulana, right? Because silwa nemicela mingeni efanayo. Over to you, Dr.
No, this was a side question I had with Uste. Who does the status quo serve? Yes, it's about resources, but I am underwhelmed by the room that we have not mentioned the issue of color and what this whole thing means. Predominantly rural areas, bamnyama, sitabantu abangafundanga, and so this system, who does it serve if it's only going to touch the peripheries but still remain the same?
Cool.
Okay. Yes, I feel like I need to say that I'm an academic, ne? And I have no intention of ever becoming a politician. I study politicians. And I always say political scientists make the worst politicians. Politician is someone who knows something, an engineer, doctor, community activist, a street trader. Been to Zambia last week, and the Minister of Youth was Zambia, was a trader, a street trader in a market. And he organized the street traders, and then he was head of the Street Traders Association for like 10, 12 years. He was head of the Regional Traders Association based here at Durban for however long. And then he was chosen by the president. Then he ran for MP, and then the president made him one of his ministers. So politicians must know things, man. Political scientists don't know anything. Now, I know books and that, but I don't know how to run a business. I don't know how to. So yeah. Anyway, build a city exactly, and it's not my thing. So I've been asked very political questions. I'll answer some. I won't answer others. Yes, I'll be honest about being appointed to that Ministerial Advisory Committee. It was very clear. Now, let me start with this. Minister Mutwaledi, when he briefed us for the first time in February, said, this is your opportunity to change the electoral system. Said, this is not just to comply with the Constitutional Court judgment. We have an opportunity to change things. So think broadly, think widely. It became very clear in our meetings that there was already a position that was being introduced. There were some members of the committee that came with a predetermined thing. And that predetermined option is what the bill is now. Now, where that comes from, who decided, I'm not going to, I don't know. But there was already a predetermined conclusion. Which limited a lot of our discussions then in the MAC, right? Because if somebody comes in with interpeguario, a ready-made meal, it came out of the oven, it was put there. Now where you respond with as close to a ready-made meal as you can, right? Which is why the second option was, let's just take the local government option and use it at national and provincial. But we could have had other options where there a more open discussion. So for example, one of the suggestions, because we had a little public hearings also as a committee, and one of the suggestions was to say that Van Zyl-Slabbert report of the 69 constituencies with multiple members, so with 3 to 7 members. And 300 being constituency and 100 being PR. Why don't we do that and allow for the members for independent candidates to run? So Van Zyl Slabbert, they'd said that it would just be parties. There was a suggestion that said, let's still have the same structure, but allow for independents to compete with party candidates. So the name that will be on the ballot box will still be individuals, but those individuals can either represent a party or they can be independent. And that is something that we thought about, but we didn't have enough time because you need to work out the numbers of it and the formulas and all that sort of stuff, and would it apply? And like I say, there was a fixed thing, that menu. And that was part of the frustration, to be honest, of that process. Now, abantu abaziyo say that the reason why there was a fixed menu is because, and I think this answers a number of questions, so I'll say it up front, is because political party leaders like having control over their MPs, their representatives in general. And even for the ruling party, the ANC, if the ANC ran a constituency election right now, the ANC would probably, if we had 400 seats and it ran a constituency election, the ANC would probably win 70% of those seats, even if it won 50% of the vote. Because remember, when you've got that first past the post where you just need to get the winner takes all, the ANC would probably, because the ANC is the political party with the most representation all over the country. That's why in Asepai you had the ANC win a lot of the wards, I think 80% of the wards, even if the percentage of the vote that it got was below 50%. Does that make sense? So actually, the ANC should want a constituency system. But the leadership of the ANC doesn't want it because it can't control its representatives. If all MPs are directly elected, those MPs have to think about their constituencies. They can't just do what Luthuli House says they must do. And it's the same with the DA. The whole mess that's happening now at the city of Joburg is because Palati was taking instruction from Cape Town, from Helen. It's true. Same thing with the EFF. Julius controls, and guys, don't assassinate me, leave me alone. I'm just a political scientist, anyone who's watching this on TV. Julius controls what MPs do in Cape Town from Winnie Madigizela House in town, in Joburg CBD. So that's why political parties haven't said anything about this. If you attend the meetings like Tlhogonolo has done, or you read the minutes like I do, you can actually see the videos of the meetings. Hi man, the political parties are like, because it's useful for parties to be able to control their representatives. And so a lot of the reason why this minimal change has been adopted is because it is the one that has the least impact on the power of political parties over their representatives. It keeps the incentive system intact. So Uputi, who was speaking about, I think there were a few examples actually given of the councillors who ANC decided didn't want, and then people organized for them independently. Part of what parties, not just the ANC, but other parties are trying to prevent is exactly that. And that's the question then of where does political power lie?
Yeah.
Because so Germany has a similar system to our local government system. Independents can run, but Germany's system is still dominated by political parties. No? In the UK, which has a first-past-the-post system, systems dominated by political parties, same in Zim, same in Kenya. But, that direct relationship between a representative and a constituency means that sometimes that representative has to be scared of the constituency. So it shifts the relationship somewhat between representatives and the leaders of their party. So having the change in the electoral system isn't enough. I think that what's come up a lot here is that we need to think about party democracy. Who controls political parties? You know, in South Africa, a political party is treated like in law, a political party is a private club. Now, because of the Political Party Funding Act, they need to account in terms of their funds, but they can choose, really, in practice, as we've seen. But a political party doesn't have to have a constitution that's consistent with the country's constitution. There's no rules about how often a political party elects leadership. There's no rules about gender. There's no rules about a political party. You run it the way that you want. In other countries, it's different. Other countries have rules and regulations around how political parties work. But one of the issues that we're facing is an issue of political party democracy, actually, and something that we must think about. There's been a question data from Stuxbrate about the presiding officers of the IEC. It's a big problem. One of the problems that we have with the IEC is that the resources, the funding of the IEC has decreased since 2009. So the IEC had a smaller budget to hold the 2019 election than it the IEC had a smaller budget to hold the 2014 election than it ran the 2009 election. So the money that goes to the IEC has been decreasing over the years. In 2019, it was smaller than 2014. 2021 was bigger than 2016 because they bought those machines, so it was a little bit more. They replaced the zip because the zip didn't work in 2019. Remember, they had to replace. Yeah. So it forces the IEC. The IEC makes the easiest choices then and the cheapest choices. So to make the principal from the school the presiding officer, you don't have to. They've been doing it for 15 years. You don't have to train them. And they can do whatever they want. So part of these issues are also about resourcing. But yeah, it's a big problem. And the problem is that when the IEC then doesn't use teachers or principals and tries to get youth, they don't train the youth properly. So in 2021, the wards where the presiding officers were recent and were mostly young people who had never done it for other elections, those are the wards that had the biggest problems with results because no one trained them properly. So I agree, it's a problem, something we need to fix, but we need to fix it holistically, not just on Section 47 of the Constitution. At the moment, there's no impact on that section because independents aren't members of political parties, and political party members have to go by political party rules. So an MP who leaves their political party won't be able to retain their seat as an independent. Does that make sense? Because that seat on this bill that's being discussed still belongs to the political party. If we adopted a different kind of system, it may require changing that section of the Constitution. Yeah, but at the moment, it's not included. With the local government view option, that majority option, the seat would still belong to the political party if you run as a political party member. Does that make sense? But what would happen is that it would trigger. No, actually, I'm lying. If you run as a political party member and you resign from your political party, it would trigger a by-election, like happens at local level. Yeah, it would trigger a by-election. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so that's what it would do. It is difficult to remove a ward councillor, which is why we had the recall option. That doesn't exist at local government local government level. But we wanted to include something that says